Welcome to the Blockchain Real Estate Podcast, sponsored by the Blockchain Real Estate Summit. Don't forget to mark your calendars for the Blockchain Real Estate Summit 2025, happening online from September 23rd through the 25th for our worldwide audience, with over 50 renowned real estate and blockchain experts and academics representing over 30 countries from around the world. Visit blockchainrealestatesummit.com for more information about the event and to subscribe to our newsletter for the latest updates on innovations in the blockchain and real estate sectors. That's blockchainrealestatesummit.com. Enjoy the show.
Hello, everybody, and welcome again to the Blockchain Real Estate Summit podcast. I am Michael Flight, your host, and this podcast is all about education and why the blockchain is the financial rails of the future and why real estate is going to be made 1,000 times better with blockchain. As always, this is not financial advice, this is not accounting advice, and this is not legal advice. I'd like to tell you also that if you go to the blockchainrealestatesummit.com, you can get a replay of our 2024 summit. It was 3 full days, most of the best people in the world, except for our current guest here. He's one of the best in the world as well. And that's why we want to highlight Brice van der Voort from realize.io. But if you will go to the blockchainrealestatesummit.com and pick up the replay, you get all 3 days plus special bonus episodes. So with that, Brice, welcome to the podcast. You're coming from sunny South France. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and exactly where you're coming from? Because I'm always envious. You always like to show me beautiful pictures, and it's like, look out my window, the Mediterranean right there. So, but it's always enlightening. So, Brice, with that, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you, Michael, for this wonderful introduction. I'm glad it will be replayed, so I can showcase to my whole family, say, look, I'm a superstar thanks to Michael. So really appreciate that. We are based in the south of France. In Nice. We are very close to Monaco, so it's very, very convenient. We also have now an office in Luxembourg. Before being here, I was based in Asia for about 10 years. So I'm very, very fortunate to be back in the south of France, but being able to have a global network and a global vision. So that's very, very attractive, and particularly in terms of real estate, because the large players, they are not local, they are global. We have the same people in the US, in Europe, in Asia, and that's very, very nice, attractive, and enlightening to be able to exchange and discuss about education and about trends on the market between the different continents. And like you mentioned, blockchain is really increasing the speed of that.
Right. So tell us a little bit about your background and how you got to creating Realize, and then we'll get further into what realize.io is. But tell us a little bit about, what you were doing before and why you want to work with real estate and technology.
So when I was in Asia, I was very fortunate to work in the construction of data centers, which is for me a very interesting part on the real estate that we will cover a bit later also with the AI. After being 8 years in Asia, almost 10, we've traveled back and forth, moved back to the south of France. It was now 9 years ago to build a family, but also to build a real estate investment firm where we focused on the French Riviera, so to do a lot of property flipping and developments. And very quickly, we faced 2 issues. The first one was how can we raise more money, which is always a problematic. And when we raise that, how can we distribute the profits in a very efficient way? Was fortunate to get introduced pretty early to blockchain. It was really by luck. Really by luck. Is a friend of mine told me, come on, let's fly to New York. We're going to meet some people. They will explain to you how tokenization is working. I say, can you speak French, please? and there I was convinced. There is no better way to onboard more people, to distribute profits and to use the technology, not per se as technology, but to have a real and concrete case and real examples. So that's why 4 years ago, we created Realize with friends, partners. We decided, okay, we need to make a strong case how to help people to invest in real estate in a very easy way and how to bring more people in that. So that's how we started. We struggled, looked on the tech, on the development, what to do, what is the key, how to go, and slowly by slowly, building a larger network and also leveraging on the Web3 environment. So for the people not so familiar with blockchain, what is amazing at the moment is you don't have competitors. You just have potential partners. And that's something which is really, really nice.
Right, right. Well, it's nice that I like the fact that you moved back to France and you have your priorities straight. You're building the family first and then building the business second. So that's really nice. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what Realize does, what Realize is, and how you're using blockchain and technology to unleash real estate?
So we're trying to provide an end-to-end solution, meaning from the project initiation to finding funds, because there are the two keys: finding good projects and finding investors and putting them together. So where blockchain is coming is at the roots on the tokenization. So how we can transfer shares representing company ownership uh, into the blockchain, and this way to enable more people to buy those shares. So that's the first, the technology part, where we can do a lot of things ourselves, or we can also work with different partners. That's the first part of the business, which is to create the project and the product. The second part is how to put that on digital exchanges to be able to offer those investment opportunities depending on the company setup and different things, if it's retail, not retail, accredited investor or not accredited investor, depend on the country, every different jurisdiction, different setup, depending on the client's need. And then the third part, which is very key to us, is the distribution. How can we bring traditional investors, people used to invest in real estate, into this digital security space within a very safe and secure environment and framework? And that's why last year we started to move into Luxembourg and to have a proper vehicle there. So really what is amazing in the blockchain is all this hard work. It's made very transparent and very easy through automation using the different regulation. And then we can leverage and build bridges between US, between Europe, but also between Asia. So that's really where blockchain has a real case usage.
So tell us a little bit more about the Luxembourg vehicles and how you're bridging Asia, Europe, US, and bringing investors in from outside their regions or outside their countries and into other regions and countries.
So within Europe, Luxembourg was very ahead in terms of regulation for the tokenization part or the securitization part. Therefore, there are some special vehicles which are made particularly project by project. So in our case, we have a securitization fund under 2004 law, which means we can have compartments dedicated for projects. Mm-hmm. Those projects can be held anywhere in the world, but the legal entity will be in Luxembourg. Therefore, the people will be able to invest into a vehicle in Luxembourg with underlying assets in different parts of the world.
When we say that, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but when we say the legal entity, the company that you can invest in, that company shares, is based in Luxembourg.
That's correct. That's correct. There will be the legal entity where either you invest or where the custody of the shares will be located in Luxembourg. This way, it's a very safe way for the people to go, because let's imagine you would like to invest in France. You don't know the French regulation. You know that French are very complicated. Uh, yeah, it's true. It's like the cuisine. We need to mix things to make it a bit more complicated and appealing. It's the same thing for investment.
Uh,
Uh, and some people will say, okay, I would love to buy this fantastic villa on the Riviera, to have it within an investment compartment, but it's too complicated. The French law first is in French. So that's a first barrier to entry. So instead of that, we can have a SPV or a certain special purpose vehicle, or to have a compartment in Luxembourg under the Luxembourg law, where the beauty is you can have it in French, in English. So that's perfect, very easy, very transparent, and it's very common for global investors to go through. So this is really using at the same time the blockchain to structure it, but also a European framework based in Luxembourg, which is used for most of the investors globally to invest and to have investment vehicle. So we don't have anymore this problem on, okay, it's a digital assets. I want to buy a token, but where will it be? Is it regulated? Is it safe? What happens if I lose my wallet? What happens if? We remove all those if. We say, you do it the way you used to do it, just in a better way with better possible outcomes.
Right, right. And for those that don't know, Luxembourg is basically the kind of the heart of the European Union, where most corporations, and it's a very small little country, but it has all kinds of corporations headquartered there, has extremely good corporation law. It's like hundreds of years of, corporation law, so that people can depend on it. It's very similar to Delaware, the state of Delaware in the United States or other places. There's established law, there's courts there, and it's something that international non-native investors can rely on, because it's like, oh, we have a framework, we know they've worked it out, we know that, they have a history of respecting investor rights.
It's totally correct. The comparison with Delaware, with the LLC, is totally that. The structure has been built so that you have to understand within the EU, so the European Union, you have 26 countries and Luxembourg is among one of them. So you can use all that. And then you have another regulation, which is in Switzerland, and another regulation in United Kingdom. So those are the different parts. But the comparison with Delaware is perfect, because that's the way in the US it's very nice, particularly for fintech companies or for new technology to be structured there. Maybe now in Texas as well, there are some opportunities. But yeah, and the comparison is correct. Or I would compare as well in Asia with Singapore.
Yeah, the other state that's really good and actually invented the LLC is Wyoming. So Wyoming is really good with corporate law, and also they have regulations now that you can form a DAO in Wyoming. So they're very cutting edge, but people rely on Delaware as the corporate standard, just like they rely on Luxembourg as the corporate standard in Europe.
Yes, correct.
So tell us a little bit about some of the projects that you're doing and some of the investors that you're connecting those projects with.
So as I previously said, I'm coming from a data center industry, which is the ideal link for real estate. Why? We have technology inside. So now with AI, recently Microsoft with BlackRock, what they are pushing, and it's just what is seen in the news. But in the core business, it's even more investment into this field. So data centers are the perfect example. Why? You have the infrastructure investment, you have the actual walls, which have a value. So it's the same thing. When you move somewhere, you want to protect your family. Same thing. You invest in walls. They are solid, they are there, they will not disappear. But then within those walls, you have a lot of people spending a lot of money to protect their data. So it's like a storage facilities with a lot of rental. So it's generating a very significant revenues. So good profits. So for the investors, it's bringing good return. It's safe, and you have technology. So it's the perfect product to use blockchain to enable investment for more people. And what we have seen in the past weeks with the explosion or with the rise of the Bitcoin is a lot of data centers are focused on Bitcoin mining, because Bitcoin mining is what? It's a data center with machine inside for Bitcoins. Therefore, they have more needs to development. They need more money to be invested in. So we can, and we are currently working on several projects for that, structure the good vehicle in Luxembourg to be able to introduce it to investment banks, family offices, and high net worth individuals. So we have now more demand in terms of investment than supply in terms of projects. So it's a very good sign.
Yeah, and I also want to hit on the data centers as infrastructure, because the data centers are the new infrastructure, so people always think of infrastructure as railroads and building airports, and but the data centers are running the highways of the financial system. The data centers are running the highways of information. And the other really cool thing about some Bitcoin mining, for example, in Latin America and also Ethiopia and parts of Africa, they're setting up Bitcoin miners to actually create a working power grid, because there's not the demand and there's nobody that's going to pay for the power. So if they set up a Bitcoin miner, the Bitcoin miner actually puts the capital in to build out the power structure. And then it's perfect, because if there's a high demand then for the people that are on the power grid in that particular region, the Bitcoin miners can shut down or modulate their power. So it's a really nice thing to bring capital into, places that really need the capital and put it in there.
You're spot on, because that's why for me it's considered as infrastructure. You're bringing network, and not people would say, okay, but we are now in a very developed country. But no, no matter in US or in France, you go in some areas, you don't have optical fiber to get your internet.
Right.
So when the data center is coming, you will have the optical fiber. And it's the same thing for the, I had a discussion last week at an event with some property developers. So they are used to build buildings.
Mm-hmm.
They say, okay, but what is a data center? I don't want to build a data center. I don't know. I say, yes, you know how to build a data center. You know how to make concretes. You know
Right.
how
Right.
to get building permits. And this is a real added value. So it's very nice to bring the education as well to those people. I mean, that's our industry. Real estate, it's a big family of different things. Some people have more commercial or residential. Those are slightly different. However, they are all able to take part of it.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about where you see the investors coming from, what the investor interest is, and where you see the future going for raising capital through tokens.
So it's for me, it's two steps or two stages, I would say. The first stage is to explain to traditional investor that in the worst case, if they invest today in token, they will have the same thing as if they were invested in a traditional investment way. So therefore, it's only a bonus if something is working well. That's on the first thing. But the second stage will be all the opportunities in terms of DeFi, in terms of secondary market, in terms of ease of trade, in terms of valuation and collateralization. So to make an example very, very simple, is today, if you own a building which is debt-free, what can you do with that? Not much. You can go to the bank, pledge it against, very, very difficult. if today these buildings are represented by shares already on the blockchain, it's very easy to go on DeFi places and to collateralize it. So, and this is not the potential future. We had the case already with some company we collaborate with, where they have already a secondary market, which is alive, which is working. So that means people have invested on the primary market, not just as a proof of concept or among friends. No, they have done it and they sold their shares to some other people that they don't know. So it's happening.
Yeah, and let's talk a little bit about go back to DeFi because some people don't know what DeFi is. So they're in the crypto world and in the blockchain space, there's market makers out there and there's also protocols out there or apps out there that you can take your share. So in the case of Brice, when he said, oh, I own this building, I don't have any debt on it, so I know what the value is and everything. You can pledge that building and borrow against it, just like you could go to a bank or you could go to any, an insurance company or something. You could also go and borrow against that and, receive, money that way and extract value out of the building that way. The thing that really helps the crypto community, and the crypto community doesn't quite understand this because they look at real estate and it's like, oh, well, it's not 1,000% return or it's not 400% return, so I'm not interested in it. But the volatility with crypto or with stocks or with any other of these, it just goes up and down. It screams up and down. So you could actually lose your collateral if you put it up when oh, I'm borrowing against Bitcoin when it's 90,000 and then it drops back down to 50,000. So with real estate, that really doesn't, you never typically go to zero, and you typically very stable prices that increase over time. So that's why it makes the perfect collateral. That's why banks have always wanted to lend against it.
Yeah, and that's here you're touching also another point is diversification for crypto investors. We are, I want to say, old school. So
Right.
we like our real estate, we like to build things. But some people have just made money or putting a lot of value into the crypto world with very high return, and they are very well off and very happy for them. But now what we see is a lot of those people from the crypto environment, they are looking at how to diversify their portfolio as well, because the key is always diversification and having access to digital security in terms of security token or token with real estate. For them, it's normal. It's very native. They will not expect to buy real estate in another way. They already have wallets. So that's also, for those people, a nice way to invest.
And Brice, one of the reasons why I wanted to talk to you is because you've got a lot of contact with institutional investors. And we have seen that the market up to this point has primarily been retail investors, small deals, and single family houses or things like that. And it hasn't been institutional capital. When you talk about data centers, I mean, we're talking, millions of dollars to build a data center, invest in a data center. So, are you seeing institutional investors come into the space now that, Realize is working with more institutional grade properties?
Uh, Definitely. But that's the reason why we had in Europe to have the setup in Luxembourg. That was to enable them to access to that. Because for them, it's they have rules to follow, how to invest, what are the vehicles they don't want to change. And yes, we are talking about millions, but for an investment bank or for those people we are discussing with 50 million US or euro, it's very small amount.
Right.
It's almost like retail investment. So we are in this gap where we tell them, look, you can do a diversification of your portfolio with some good return, and they are willing to try. So that's really the counterpart we took. Retail is more complicated in terms of regulation, but also in terms of cost, because we need to invest a lot of money to do marketing or education. So the more people listen to your podcast, the more people are becoming educated, which is very important. But we just have a limited amount of resources in terms of time. So we cannot do podcast to everyone in the world yet.
Right.
Soon we will do. So that's why they have an appetite. We are used to work with them. We travel a lot in the different events, always for education. But when you look at the newly launched money market fund from UBS,
Mhm.
um, it's really a proof that institutional investors are moving into the game.
And one of the things that's different from the EU is they have clarification on custody. And not a lot of people, especially retail people and maybe people that are listening to this, understand what custody is. In the United States, right now, the SEC and there's some issues with banks doing custody of digital assets. And they don't quite understand that it's the same thing as paper shares. It's just, tradable on a blockchain. But the EU has some pretty good custody rules, and they've also got larger institutional banks that will custody that. And by custody, it's like, we're going to hold your shares. We're going to make sure that you're not taking these shares and putting them in your pocket and stuff. And we're safekeeping these. So why don't you tell us a little bit more about how custody could be a game changer for you in Luxembourg.
It's really a key, and we work with a custodial bank where wealth manager can at the same time buy stocks, so listed stocks, or can buy shares, tokenized shares within the same control panel. They have one access where they are used for years to buy stocks, and now they can buy those shares. So it's really key, like you say, to have a custodial partner, which is a well-known financial institution, which is enabling people to have access to that. So without, technically or even legally, we could do it, or we could do through third parties, but then you miss the trust. And
Right,
this
right.
factor is very, very important, because if I say, come on, you can trust me, I will, I will take care of your asset and I will protect it, and I will do it. But if you go to large, well-known bank, it's a lot easier for them to do. So this way, it's very, very important. And the custody for me has to be, I know it's a bit sad, but to start, we are more like in a centralized or traditional finance way.
Right, right.
Not have everything decentralized. We have to work like everyone. Before running, you need to learn how to walk. So that's very, very same.
Well, but a lot of individual investors, especially guys in crypto, don't understand that pension fund just can't give their money to you. I mean, they could, but most of the time,
Please,
a
I'm
pension,
here.
yeah, yeah, or an insurance company, or one of these institutional investors, because they're actually working as a fiduciary, managing other people's money. So they want to make sure that they're not holding it on their books. It's being held someplace where there's a neutral third party that is trusted. And so I know that blockchain is trustless, but in certain situations you need the trust, because most of the time you need that trust, and you need somebody that's going to verify, because it's not your money, it's not their money.
Yeah, there are rules to be followed,
Yeah.
and we have to play by the rules. We cannot say, okay, we are coming from the blockchain world. It's only DAO everywhere, because the problem, I would say, and this is more a philosophical or discussion, is about honesty and how human being is. If we were all nice, honest, and everything, we had no war, no crime, no police needed. But unfortunately, for now, it's not the case. And therefore, to have a custodial as a third party regulated, it's very, very important. and it's very safe. And like you said, when you take care of others people assets or money, you need to make sure it's very safe.
And what you said is important too. You need to like walk before you can run. This is new technology, so institutions aren't going to put their, trust in some unknown software in a DAO that you have no idea what's going to happen. And I did have this conversation at a crypto conference here in Salt Lake City, permissionless, and I was talking to these guys, and they're like, "Code is law, man." I'm like, "Well, bad code makes bad law." So, and I said, if you look at the start of Ethereum, they had the Ethereum DAO, and there's an Ethereum hack and all the rest of it, and so you need to make sure that the code works and it's working over and over again, and there's trust, and then there'll be much more trust from institutions.
Yeah, there will be, but there is also
Yeah.
it's very, very important that there is a backup, and
Right.
we are talking about real estate. So if tomorrow the network is down and you want to sell your building, you still need to have a backup somewhere
Right.
for the third party. So that's also very, I'm trying to be always very, very pragmatical and down to earth. So I have a building, I own a building, the shares are held on the blockchain, I can do a lot of things. Fantastic. What if the blockchain is down? Okay, we will have a lot of more issues than just selling a building. But if I want to, I can, because by law, there is a record on a different platform which is held. So therefore, I can still prove my ownership even without the blockchain. So a lot of little things like that. Yes, it's not that modern, but we still need it.
Is there anything that we didn't cover that you'd like to cover about Realize.io?
I think people can come to you or come to me or look more. If one thing I want to push is really people should try, listen, learn, and they will be very happy afterwards. So no matter they come to us, to you, or to other companies, be aware about what's coming. It's really not coming in the future. It's already there. Major players are here. So just try and you'll be very, very happy.
So if people wanted to learn more about working with Realize.io, and also let's stress this, the fact that you are working in Luxembourg with Luxembourg rules, but you're working with real estate all over the world, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So, and I like the
Really,
fact what you said before is you're bridging, real estate opportunities with investors so that, you're bridging from Europe, you're bridging from Asia. It might be, a building in the United States. It might be a building in Asia. It might be a building in Europe, and you're bridging all those, continents.
the key idea is to use the central place and the financial safety of Luxembourg to enable investors to invest anywhere in the world. And at the same time, to enable project owner or asset owner who owns buildings or assets to structure it within a structure in Luxembourg to enable investors to come in. So it's really global. That can be someone from the US investing in a vehicle in Luxembourg for a project in China.
Right.
That will be really what is attractive.
Right, right. So if people wanted to get in touch with you to learn more about either investing in some of the projects that you've got on your platform or listing some projects on your platform or just, a little bit more education, how would they get in contact with you?
They can contact us through the website or on the podcast. There will be the link or email me directly. Very, very happy to help them. Or the best is, they all have your contact, so it's perfect. What is important again, what I want to emphasize is we are now one family, meaning it's very important that the people listening to this podcast understand that I would work with Michael. We are not competing. I would work with people in Asia. The idea is to help you to find the best way to structure your either investment or your projects. So very,
Right.
very hopeful.
Well, I will tell you that Brice has always been really, really approachable, really, really, informative about what he's doing. So go check out realize.io. That's REALIZ.io. Oh,
And see it here.
yeah, yeah. So, and we will have it in the show notes. We will have all that information. As always, Brice, thank you very much for coming. Really appreciate it. Really appreciate everything you brought to the podcast. This is not financial advice. This is not legal advice. You should always contact your attorney, your accountant, any type of consultant to verify anything when you're making an investment. Again, this is sponsored by the Blockchain Real Estate Summit podcast. So go to blockchainrealestatesummit.com to get the 2024 replay, to get all kinds of great other podcasts there. We've got articles, we've got things, and we've got connections to people like Brice here that really can expand what you want to know about blockchain real estate. And investing worldwide is what we're looking to do, is to open up real estate to investors worldwide. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you for tuning in to the Blockchain Real Estate Podcast, brought to you by the Blockchain Real Estate Summit. Don't forget to mark your calendars for the Blockchain Real Estate Summit 2025, happening September 23rd to the 25th, online for our global audience. Secure your tickets today at blockchainrealestatesummit.com/registration. If you enjoyed today's episode, please follow the Blockchain Real Estate Podcast on your favorite platform and leave us a review. Your feedback helps boost our visibility and allows us to reach more listeners like you. Have a guest in mind you'd like us to interview? Let us know by leaving a comment at blockchainrealestatesummit.com. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you at the summit.
Adam Carswell, the voice of liberty. This podcast is solely intended for informational and entertainment purposes only and is not intended to provide tax, legal, investment, or accounting advice. You should consult your own tax, legal, accounting, or investment advisors before engaging in any transaction or undertaking. Thank you for listening to the Blockchain Real Estate Podcast, which is a part of the Blockchain Real Estate Summit Network. Go to blockchainrealestatesummit.com for more information, free reports, and giveaways with free stuff. Thank you.